Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, and I'm joined today by one of my very, very, very good friends. We just got to spend the weekend together this past weekend. He flew into Orlando for a customer event that we did, and I'm so excited to introduce you to Ethan Beute. And this is probably not the first time you've heard from Ethan. He has been on the podcast, I think, a few times in the past. But Ethan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me back. And thank you so much for being an amazing host in Orlando.
Yeah, that was a super fun event, and we'll be talking about it more, sharing more of the details to B2B Growth listeners later. But Ethan, you're the VP of marketing at a company called BombBomb. You're the author of a brand new book called Rehumanize Your Business. You're the host of the Customer Experience podcast, and you're actually a brand new co-host of this show of B2B Growth. You're going to be hosting a series called CX, so it's all about customer experience. And that's really what we're going to be doing a deep dive on in this episode, is talking about customer experience. I would love to kind of kick off the episode. You've been doing something really cool with your show, with the Customer Experience podcast. We've been asking folks kind of how do they define customer experience? And so for an episode that's really dedicated to talking about customer experience, I'd love for you to kick us off by sharing how do you define it?
I don't have a straight go-to definition, but some of it, the themes and the characteristics are, it's every touch point. So it crosses obviously marketing, sales, customer success, and beyond, even though some organizations will mentally kind of like punt it down the line into customer success. And it's their thing to think about and worry about because it has the word customer in it, right? But the customer's experience is literally every single touch point with your organization. But it's not just the touch point itself, although that's how you manage or produce or create or improve the customer experience. It's also, above all, the thoughts and feelings that those touch points leave people with. So it's, it can be good and go bad, or it can be neutral and go really good, or it can be bad and go good. And as you are able to improve these touch points and the thoughts and the feelings and the outcomes that people are left with along the line as they're interacting with you and your brand and your team members and your product or your service. So it's this really holistic thing, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but one of the things I really wanted to explore by doing this as an ongoing podcast conversation is, how do you manage this even though it crosses a bunch of often siloed parts of the organization? Who owns it? How do you measure it? How do you manage it? How do you manage the handoffs from one team to another as a customer's relationship or status changes with you, and all of these other things? And so, it's one of those things that a lot of people will give you a really hard and fast definition, but the more people you talk to, the more different hard and fast definitions you get.
Yeah. Yeah. And you and I both actually read a book called Never Lose a Customer Again by Joey Coleman. And I've done an episode about it on B2B Growth in the past, but I love how Joey broke it down into kind of 8 phases. And that really supports a lot of what you're saying, because those 8 phases that Joey talks about in his book really stretch across everything from, sales and marketing, pre-sale to, right when the customer makes the purchase decision, all the way through to advocacy. And so, to your point, it does touch the entire organization. It's not just, it shouldn't be something that just customer success is thinking about. Sales needs to be thinking about it. All different, ops needs to be thinking about it. Every organization in your company needs to be thinking about customer experience. And so I love that you're doing a podcast completely dedicated to having these conversations around what the customer experience is and how we can make it better. I want to transition into your book, Ethan, because it's a book that you guys have just recently. It's brand new on Amazon. I think it hasn't, it's not launched yet, but you can pre-order it now. I think by the time this episode goes live, people will actually be able to order it. So it's called Rehumanize Your Business, and it's really about personal video. And I want to have you share something that I was just reading, kind of some of the highlights from the book, and a lot of our conversation this past weekend made me look to certain parts of the book based on certain things you'd said. And you share a story in the first chapter about your mom that honestly, it gave me goose chills reading that story, and how it ties into personal video, but on a higher level, how it ties into customer experience. Can you share that story about your mom and kind of how it ties into the rest of the book?
Yeah, it really the story speaks to why, and I'm glad you connected with it. It illustrates everything that I love about working my job day to day by using personal videos on a regular basis. And so, what happened was last January, my mom died unexpectedly. She was in her early 70s, but was in a really, really good phase of her life. So I flew back to Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is where my parents live, and my sister and her family, and my brother and his family flew in from Phoenix. And we did 2 visitations before the funeral. And at the second visitation, it was the morning of the funeral. I'm having a conversation. There's so many family and friends there. And it's one of those just such bittersweet things where you're surrounded by all these awesome people who you love and who love you and are there to support you. And of course, the bitter part of it is that we have to suffer a loss collectively as a community of people who knew and loved my mom in order to all get in the same room at the same time. And so you're having all these nice conversations with people, and you're, without any disinterest or disrespect in the person you're talking with, you kind of like shoot your eyes around the room. And my eyes made contact with a gentleman, and it didn't totally make sense in the moment. I was like, it doesn't click. What is that guy doing here? Mm. And so as soon as the conversation wrapped up, I went over to see him, and I just got a really nice hug from him and from his wife. And this was a customer of ours, a gentleman who I knew because he was using videos at a rapid rate. And I pay attention to who's sending a lot of videos because I want to know who they are and what they're doing and what success looks like for them and how they found us and all those things that we want to know about our happy and successful customers. And so I knew Andy Alger for probably 3 years or so, and we had never met in person. He didn't know a single family member of mine, and neither did his wife. They didn't know anybody there. And they drove 2.5 hours to be there with me to spend 5 minutes in conversation, because you know how these events go, like as immediate family, everyone wants to at least connect with you briefly. It's like the not as fun version of your wedding, right? Yeah. Where, the bride and groom need to see everybody. And so we only spent 5 minutes together. And so they spent 5 hours in the car that day. They had no other business on the west side of the state except to be there in that moment with me. And he knew and felt that it was important enough to be there in person to make that happen. And I offer all this to say, you can build a real relationship through video. Mm. it's not as good as being there in person. James, I felt like I knew you and we had spent time in conversations and we'd swapped emails and I'm sure I'd sent you videos, but, and you had actually been out here to Colorado Springs, but prior to you coming out here, we had a relationship, but if you and I had sent 10 or 15 videos back and forth, it would be even stronger. And so the point being, despite the time and distance that keep us apart from our family members and our friends, honestly, I mean, you start to question why you're living halfway across the country when you lose a parent suddenly and unexpectedly. But, this ability to build real psychological proximity and real relationship and real friendship with people across time and distance, including your customers, your prospects, your team members. I know the Sweetfish team works remotely. And so, the more you can do a Zoom call or send videos, the closer that you're going to feel to each other. And so I use that to set the tone that this is a real thing. It has a real impact on your business, but it also, above all, has a real impact on your life. And the theme picks up at the end of the book as well. Something I haven't substantiated is, and we'll get into this in a minute, that this is a more effective way to work. You're going to get better outcomes when you mix personal videos into the way that you're connecting and communicating with your prospects and your customers. But it's also a more satisfying way to work. If you value relationships as much or more than you value transactions, you will love the effect on your life of moving to some simple personal videos in place of plain typed out text.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. When I read that story, it made so much sense. I mean, having you send me videos, even leading up to me going to Colorado Springs last year, I felt like I legitimately knew you better than, the hundreds of other people that I correspond with over the course of, a year, probably thousands of people that I correspond with over the course of the year via email. But having been able to see you in videos made me feel that much closer to you leading up to actually meeting you in person. So when I read that story in chapter 1, I thought, man, that's just a beautiful illustration to me of how I obviously care deeply about relationships. And so seeing how that worked out for you, and that someone would drive 2.5 hours across state lines that you'd never met in person before because you felt like you knew each other because you'd exchanged these video emails. I want to tie this back to customer experience, Ethan. You talk in chapter 4 and chapter 5 in the book about how personal videos directly correlate to a better customer experience. Can you dive into that a bit for us and maybe share some stories there of what that correlation is?
Sure. If I remember correctly, those chapters are what I call kind of the mini case study chapter, where I talk about a variety of people in a variety of roles and when and how they use videos. And then in chapter 5 is the top 10 times to use video instead of plain typed out text. We also talk about when not to send a video in that chapter too. But the high level point, I just spent 45 minutes with Joey Coleman yesterday, coincidentally, and I had him talk a lot about video because he is just a great, huge advocate of doing small things to improve customer experience. He's also then an advocate of video. And so I talk about a couple leaders, right? So if you're listening to this and you're in a leadership position, even if you're working with a team that is not remote or distributed, you probably don't have as much face time with the people that you need to kind of light a fire under, and the people you need to pat on the back, and the people you need to thank and mention. So there are a variety of ways to use videos to prop up the people on your team and to get that quality face time, but in a way that's convenient. What we're talking about here is simple asynchronous webcam and smartphone videos in place of a message you might otherwise type out as a Slack or as a 2-paragraph email or whatever. Obviously in the beginning of a relationship with a potential customer, or as our mutual friend of ours, Sangram Vajre, likes to say, the future customer.
Future customer, yeah.
Your primary goal there is to demonstrate warmth and competence, and warmth trumps competence. People want to know that you have their best interest in mind, that you actually care about them, that there's some level of sincerity there before they actually care about how adept and equipped and smart you are to deliver on your promise or solve their problem or whatever the case may be. Because in the absence of warmth, they naturally wonder, well, great, you've got all these amazing strengths and you're highly, highly competent, but are you going to act in my best interest? And so what we're trying to do there is build trust. It's an easy thing to say, but everyone knows that it's true with like a book like The Speed of Trust, one of the great Covey titles. We all know that one of the goals out of the gate is to build trust, because once you build trust, everything else goes faster. And so what we're often trying to do with our emails and our phone calls, maybe text messages, if that's part of your flow and your cadence, is to get someone typically into a phone call, but then B, like a face-to-face meeting. And we do that here at BombBomb. We serve customers in about 40 different countries, primarily US, Canada, UK, and Australia, but, far-flung places beyond Colorado Springs. And so we do most of our future customer calls or prospect calls on Zoom. And we like to use video and get face-to-face because we know it builds trust and rapport. And so if you're trying to get face-to-face with someone, if you're a territory or a city person, you can actually drive and visit people. Your goal is to get there sooner than later. You want to make that true eye-to-eye, face-to-face human connection, either through a digital call or in person, faster, because that's how you move the whole relationship faster. Everything goes faster once they have that instinct that says, I trust this person. And so as you are hiding behind plain text and trying to get people's attention as a faceless voicemail or a plain email with a signature as your only differentiator, otherwise it's the same black text on the same white screen, why wouldn't you put yourself face to face earlier and more often in the process? And when people do it, we see that it generates results. 87% of people who send videos with us say they get more replies and responses to their emails. And about a quarter of them say they've doubled or more than doubled their reply rate. And so that reply is the start of a conversation. So when you reach out and you say, I'm that person who left you that voicemail, or thank you so much for registering on our website, I'm the person over here that's going to be assisting you with blah, 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 or I'm the person who would love to discover more about you and your business, find out what your challenges and opportunities are, and see if we can't be a good fit for you in order to solve this problem or capitalize on this opportunity. And so that's, in the beginning, it's a no-brainer straight away. But then in all these places, like we hear it all the time and we see it all the time, is, you got my business and then you kind of drop me cold. I mean, sure, you put up a support site, but then what, right? And so the more you can mix in some of these human touches to let people know, like, we're not that big a company. We have about 40,000 customers, about 120 employees, but some people on the outside of us who don't recognize the core values we operate by think, they're just some brand, some faceless corporation, whatever. And so, that's why we mix video in throughout so many of our touches in CS, in marketing, and in sales, to just kind of humanize the experience and have them know we are real people. We actually care about you. We're going to look you in the eye. We're going to let you know that we know where you're at. We know what your problem or opportunity is, and that we want to help you move forward.
Yeah. And I love that in the book, Ethan, you talk about not just how salespeople can leverage videos. You spend a good amount of time, touching on that, how, from a sales acceleration standpoint, personal videos absolutely make an impact there, but also, in marketing and customer success as well. And specific use cases of, regardless of what part of the organization you're sitting in, personal videos can make a significant impact in driving whatever result that you're looking for, because ultimately at the end of the day, like you said earlier, it's all about trust. And by being able to be authentic and be human on camera, it allows you to convey that warmth and that trust in a way that you just can't with text. And so you have made me a believer in video, and I'm really excited for our listeners to dive into this book and also to subscribe to your podcast. So in closing here, Ethan, I want to make sure that people know exactly where to find your book. They can pre-order it or order it depending on when this episode goes live, but it's called Rehumanize Your Business: How Personal Videos Accelerate Sales and Improve Customer Experience. They can find that on Amazon. And is it pretty much anywhere else books are sold, right? Because Wiley published.
Yeah. The five links that we use are Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, IndieBound. For those of you who like the independent bookstores and what they do for communities, IndieBound is the place to order from your independent booksellers online. And for bulk purchasing, 800 CEO Read is an awesome company up in Milwaukee. They have excellent customer experience, and they're fulfilling all of our bulk ordering if people want to buy for their team or their company or to give away as gifts. And so all of that is, if you go to bombbomb.com/book, You can learn more about the whole project, learn a little bit more about what's inside, and then all those 5 links are available there too. Or you can just search in Amazon.
And so go to bombbomb.com/book. You can check out all of those links. Then I also want you, since you're listening to this show, obviously you're a fan of podcasts, make sure to search the Customer Experience Podcast and go and subscribe to Ethan's brand new podcast, all about customer experience. You're going to love it. He is also going to be co-hosting a series in B2B Growth. Just look for the headline #CX. Anytime you see that hashtag in front of a B2B Growth episode moving forward, that is likely going to be an interview or episode that Ethan has produced for our channel. So Ethan, I am extremely grateful that you would, one, be a co-host to B2B Growth, but also grateful for your time here today, talking about your book, talking about your podcast. How else can listeners stay connected with you?
I am Ethan Beute, ETHANBEUTE, Ethan Beute on all the social networks. And so feel free to hit me up on any network that you're using. It's just Ethan Beute. And it's the same thing with BombBomb. It's just the word bomb twice, BOMB, BOMB. And of course, we're on all the social networks as that name as well. So I'm happy to connect with anyone, especially in this community. I love what you're doing, James. I love the people that you've connected and the relationships that you're cultivating, not just for yourself and your team members, but among all the other people who are listeners and co-hosts and just participants in this movement toward a better way to work and a better way to grow our businesses together.
Ethan, thank you so much for your time today. This has been incredible. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. You know, all those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.